Hello, everyone, and welcome to CSA's webinar series, CSA Cloud Bytes. Today's webinar is titled How Shutterstock Implemented DevSecOps from the Ground Up. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please enter any questions that you have during the presentation in that Ask a Question tab at the bottom of your screen. The presenters will be answering questions during the presentation. Additionally, the slides from this webinar are not going to be provided. However, you can access the recording of this webinar anytime. You just need to use the same link to view the webinar again or to share it with a colleague. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Bobadilla, who is a Director of Product and App Security at Shutterstock. I'm also joined by Simon Maple, who's the VP Developer Relations and Community at Snyk. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you here today. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our presenters.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone to this webinar. There's going to have a few slides on this webinar, and then we're going to jump into some discussion. So why don't we start off by just introducing ourselves. My name's Simon Maple. As mentioned, I work for Snyk, and I do a lot of the developer relations and community work there. I've been at Snyk now for a few years. Previously to that, doing more developer relations and more engineering. And joining me, I'm very happy to introduce Bobadilla. Christian, welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I work for Shutterstock. I'm in charge of product and application security. I have been there for probably, it's going to be more than a year and a half now, and we use Snyk, and we work with a lot of developers all day long. So that's daily basis.
Awesome. And yeah, we won't be talking too much about Snyk, but we will be using it as during some examples. I work for Snyk, as I mentioned, and Snyk is a developer-first security tool that helps find vulnerabilities throughout your cloud-native AppSec platform. And just to show you, we're not just static people. If I end slides, there we are. Hello, everyone. But unfortunately, we do have some more slides to get through just before we start. So I'll pass back to the agenda, and you'll see what we're going to be talking about. So first of all, I'll cover a little bit about how application development has changed, really, and how our applications have changed and what that's meant for DevSecOps. We'll then take a quick background on the Shutterstock security program, and turn this into more of a best practices and learn from how Shutterstock have adopted a new DevSecOps program, some of the things that have worked, etc. And we're always welcome to take Q&A, so please do go ahead and ask questions in the panel in this interface, and that'll come directly to us, so we'll be able to answer them. So first of all, let's take a little bit of a step back and see how our lives were pre-code, and we'll talk about what changes have happened as organizations have moved into more of a cloud and cloud-native design. So previous to our adoption of cloud-native technologies, as developers, you can see here in the yellowy kind of orange boxes, developers really cared about the code they wrote and the libs, the open source libraries and frameworks that they pulled in. So this is realistically just the code in our IDEs and the dependencies that our build systems used to pull in. Everything else that was part of the platform, whether there was any virtualization, hardware, network, servers, VMs, any applications that would go alongside our custom-made application, all of that would typically be handled by a platform team, an IT team, the operations team. However, as we modernize our applications, we digitally transform, and I promise there won't be too many buzzwords. We will try and demystify this. We digitally transform into the more of a cloud application, and realistically, what that means is we do a lot of containerization. We push to multi-vendor clouds. We do some orchestration. We have much more infrastructure as code. There's a huge number of changes that the developer role needs to go through, and as developers do take more responsibility around many of these items. So for example, you'll see developers playing with Docker containers, Docker images. You'll see developers playing with Terraform scripts, Kubernetes config, etc. We need to make sure that developers are well equipped to not just make changes, but also test and secure, etc. Because there are a lot of greater risks that can come in, and while previously we tended to look at, as a developer, known vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities in our own code, so this is anything like CVEs or vulnerabilities in our own code, like perhaps looking, code injection or SQL injection, those kind of things. Now we need to think about the unpatched OSs that our container pulls in, bad config, perhaps misconfigurations, etc., open ports, misconfigurations in our Docker file, in our Terraform scripts or Kubernetes configs, and those kind of things. So there's much more to think about, and we need a platform to be able to support this, and that's why of these areas that I just talked about, there are 4 key areas. There's more of custom code. This is the tip of the iceberg that a developer will typically see straight away, right? The code that they want to write in their IDE, and you're looking at around 10 to 20% of code that is custom. And SAST is a great way of being able to test that custom code, looking through your code, trying to find issues, bugs, and hopefully getting solutions to that as to how we can change our code to fix those issues. Beyond that, though, of course, we have build systems that pull in open source libraries. Now, 80 to 90% of our code base is typically open source. And this is a great thing. This isn't a bad thing. This is wonderful, because we as developers can write some custom code and use huge amounts of open source code to make our application do amazing things very, very quickly. One of the things that we need to think about, though, in this open source dependency graph that is built is that 80% of the vulnerabilities are found in transitive dependencies. So it's not necessarily just the dependencies we pull in, but it's the dependencies that they pull in, and so forth, and so forth. And this dependency graph can get pretty significant. So 4 out of 5 of the known vulnerabilities in our dependencies exist in the transitives rather than the direct. So that's worth noting. Then once a developer creates their application, they go into the Docker files, they think about the containers, and then all of a sudden they have a huge number of Linux packages that they need to look at to see if there are any vulnerabilities in those as well, and a number of potentially key binaries as well, before looking at the infrastructure as code. Because of course people will, as I mentioned, Terraform scripts, misconfigurations in Kubernetes config, those kind of things, which developers, it's not something that developers tend to pay as much attention in, as opposed to getting things to work and getting things up and running. So it's ultimately important that we have tooling in each of these spaces to look for misconfigurations, known vulnerabilities, and errors and issues, should I say, in our code that are vulnerable to these problems. So these are the 4 things that we really see at Snyk as what we call a cloud native application security solution. Now, that's all very well and good, but we still need to think about DevSecOps. And DevSecOps is the idea, a big part of that is shifting left. Okay, but what does shift left mean? Does that mean we find things earlier? Does that mean we test things earlier? Does it mean developers do things, take on more responsibility? Well, kind of like yes to a lot of those. We don't want to just test late on, right? This is the big change that DevOps brought in. We can now push things much faster to production. So we need to make sure that security is a part of that, and that we're testing as early as possible all the way through this deployment. However, we can't just do things earlier. We can't just give developers a list of vulnerabilities and say, there you go. We need to do 2 things. We need to, 1, empower developers, and that is done by tools and the ownership, the empowerment for a developer, not just to find, but have the insights, the knowledge, and the tooling to be able to fix. Okay, so empowering developers to be able to work through that, and also enabling the security team. The security team need to provide guide rails, need to provide policies, need to support developers and be close to developers to own that security. And this is the way that DevSecOps can succeed, and also the way that security can scale through engineering organizations. So there are 3 pillars of DevSecOps, and this is all the slides, I promise you. Maybe there's one more, but the 3 pillars of DevSecOps, and we'll talk with Christian about these going forward. But people, process, and tools are the 3 areas that we have seen successful DevOps transitions, and this is very similar with DevSecOps. We need people to come together. We need people to talk. We need people to be able to feel the freedom to reach out to others. We need processes that pull security in. We need tools that help us with our roles and help us, as well as technologies that enable us to be more cloud native and have a secure way of being cloud native. So these are the 3 pillars that we will be talking about. And with that, I promised enough slides, didn't I? So why don't we go to faces and we can have a chat. So Christian, let's have a quick talk now with that kind of like intro to Shutterstock. I'd love to kind of like hear about your time at Shutterstock, how long you've been at Shutterstock, and what the story, security story was at Shutterstock when you joined versus how it is today. What's the journey been like?
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned before, I have been working here at Shutterstock for more than a year and a half so far, and I think it is going to be 2 years in July. So there wasn't a proper security team before. So 2 years ago, there were some people working for fraud and other engineers working in some security tasks, but it wasn't a security team itself. And of course, when you join a new company, nobody knows you, right? So that's the first challenge. Then, because there wasn't a proper security team, the security culture in general might not be as good, right? Because there were not people trying to spread security among the different areas, marketing, developers, and that makes you move into a new company even harder because you need to start changing the culture there. Now, when you do that, go ahead.
No, please carry on.
When you do that, you have to be mindful. They are not used to security, right? They didn't have a team before. So you cannot just go there and change everything. Developers, they want to keep developing new features super fast. They don't want to do extra work or unnecessary work, right? They just want to be efficient. And you have to keep in mind that when you join a new company and start changing things around.
Yeah, because I guess when there was no security team before you joined, everyone was kind of like, well, maybe not doing their own thing, but had a very different impression of what was the right level of security, as opposed to being told it by now a security person who's kind of come in. How was the reaction to you from the engineering team, perhaps, when you first joined?
I think it's always a little bit hard at the beginning because, again, they don't know you, right? They sometimes they think, oh, your security is just going to block us, and I don't like that idea from people. I prefer them that we are enablers. We are going to help you to make a secure application, for example, or if they are having any issues with security, we will try to help them. Sometimes they don't realize that it's a security issue because they never had a security team before. So we explain, you know what, I see this, that seems to be a security issue, and that works.
And I think one of the kind of like, there's two things there. That's really interesting what you said about the development team thinking that the security team was going to block them, and that's like a really common thread, I think, between a lot of engineering and security teams, in terms of either understanding that resistance or being able to get around that, so that the engineering team saw it from your point of view. What was the kind of dynamic with that? How did you approach that, and how did you make that work?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it is always going to be security going to talk to the engineering or developers, right? Because before, they didn't know that they can even contact us, right? So at the beginning, it's going to look that way. We are going to be talking to developers. We're going to go and have a meeting with them. Now, I don't want to create this mental image in which, oh, here's Christian, he's talking to me, I did something wrong, right? Because that's what happened with most of the security people. They just talk to somebody when there's something happening. There's an issue, there's a security problem there. So, and this was way easier before COVID, of course. So what I did, I was always going and talk to people and ask, hey, what are you doing? Right, so they removed this image. Oh, Christian's talking to me. There's something wrong happening. That image was never created there.
Yeah.
Because they knew that I was going to stop by their desk and ask, hey, what project are you working on? And when you do that connection, they will start thinking about security. They will know that there's a person that works for security now at the company. So that, I think that's the beginning. That's how you start breaking that or improving the relationship between security and engineers, developers.
And I think with DevSecOps, when we talk about the 3 pillars of DevSecOps being people, tools and technology, and process, the culture is always anyone can buy a tool, anyone can invest in a specific new technology, anyone can change a process. But if you don't get the mindset of the people right, and if you don't get them on board, everything can be circumvented or done wrong or incorrectly, right? So
Right.
in terms of where you started, what were your kind of like first moves? Like you mentioned, being like very visible and not just there to provide say, hey, you've got an issue here, you've got an issue here. How what kind of things did you do to break down the security to engineering barriers?
There were some specific things that we do with developers, and I think we are going to talk about that a little bit later. But I think reinforcing to them that we are going to be there for them and help them,
Mm-hmm.
it is a good sign for them. Now, the application security is just 2 people, and we have more than 400 developers, right? We cannot scale.
Yeah.
We don't know all the projects that they are working on. So they are going to be our eyes, right? If they see something, they can relate to us. They can talk to us. Now, to be able to do that, you need to improve the security culture, because they don't know what is wrong until they have a sense of what security does, right? Now, when I joined Priceline, my boss, she gave me a Word document with some of the items that I had to do. Let's say, I think I did it for the first 90 days. And Snyk was one of those projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I got together with the DevOps or cloud team at Shutterstock and started explaining how we needed to do this without impacting developers, right? Because if you go to a new company and you start blocking developers, they're not going to be happy, right? They need to understand why we need to put security in place. And when they're okay with that, they will understand better why we're asking for fixes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you did put security in place, how did you introduce security into the development organizations then?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we have tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And tools are good. They're useful, of course, but you need to know how to use them, right? And I think part of it is educating the developers, right? If you want to put a Snyk in the pipeline, you have to explain why we want to do that, right? What is their risk? Why we should be looking at this? Why we should be fixing vulnerabilities?
Mm-hmm.
And there are multiple ways to introduce security inside of the development, right? There are a bunch of tools that can do that. Having the right tool is important. Understanding how to use it is very important. And having the guidance from security is also very relevant. We don't want, again, and understanding how developers are going to be working, as again, we don't want to be blockers.
Mm-hmm. And is there a so you mentioned you want the dev team to kind of like go to security. What does it look like when they do go to security? Are they like, is it very specific problems? Is it a general advice? How did they?
I would say all of them, but it's
right.
it made me so happy when they are coming to us, because otherwise I wouldn't know about this issue.
Yeah.
Right? Because I cannot be inserted in all the projects. And it's super, it made me so happy when they are going to our Slack channel and they say, hey guys, I have this new project. I don't know if this is an issue. Can you help me to figure it out?
Yeah.
And that is so good. So
and how long after you started did you start seeing that happening?
I would say it took me a year.
A year. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's largely, would you say it was because they started seeing value in what you were offering, and then they recognized that?
Yeah, so that's very important. They need to understand security and see the value, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're there for a reason.
Mm.
And unfortunately, there are so many companies that don't have a security team, right? But if you have one of them, you need to take advantage of the security team. Ask questions. We will try to provide the best answer from the risk and security point of view.
Yeah.
But developers, they are always super smart people, right? They always want to learn more.
So
Now, when you were showing some of the hacks, they were super. Oh my god, I didn't know that was possible. I always heard about cross-site scripting, but I have never seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is interesting, right? Because like developers love to learn. They love to better themselves, right? So how do you get developers interested in security specifically?
Yeah, so the way I do it is making security a little bit more fun for people. Okay, so we had a few events that we created as a security team. The main goal, one of the goals is they will know that there is a security team there, right? Because we're creating this event, they will know the team. Because they are super smart and they want to solve issues or problems, we created a game. We already did this game in 2020, twice already, so 2 years, and we're going to do it again in 2021. So the name is called The Riddle, and basically is a scavenger hunt. And you can see the riddle right in the middle. It's just this like a screenshot. The second is the first clue that they're going to get. It's just binary message. Most of the developer, of course, they know what to do with that. So the way this works, they will solve a problem. And when they solve that problem, the answer to that problem is going to be the second part of the puzzle. And they just keep going. And this is incremental. And all the steps they are related to security somehow. And we use emails, we use Slack, we use some external websites, we use images. Our company Shutterstock, we sell images, videos. So we put a secret inside of an image, and that secret was encrypted, and they needed to figure out how to extract that secret from this image. That was mind-blowing for some of the people that have been working with images for so long that they didn't know this was possible. So they are learning, but also is making it fun for them.
Yeah. And I think that problem solving, that's what really kind of like connects with developers, right? I mean, I've been a developer for a long time now, and when I see something that I want to solve or perhaps can't solve, it G's you on more to actually do it. And when you see a challenge like this, you want to do it. You want to have a play. So it's a great way to really get to the kind of core developer aspect of wanting to solve something or fix something in a fun way, right? And this looks awesome. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people thinking, oh yeah, how can I want to do something similar to that as well.
Yeah, and it's funny because the first time I did it, it was during kind of lunchtime because I didn't know how many people were going to join. And I was in the Parsons building office, and I went to the cafeteria. The people were not even eating; they were just playing the game.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, I think we have 100 people the first time playing the game, and the second time we have 150.
How long would you say a developer? Actually, there's a really interesting question actually coming in, which I'll get to in just a second. How long would you say each developer would take on this kind of thing? Is it like a 30-minute, an hour, or half a day, or what's the duration?
It is. I think the record was close to an hour and an hour 20 minutes for the second one. But again, they can work as a team because that's super important. Some of the developers are they prefer to work by themselves.
Yeah,
totally fine. And other people, they prefer to work as a team. And every time they're working as a team, they go faster.
All right, cool. It's a significant investment when you say it like that as well, right? When there's 100 people, hour and a half, that's a lot of time. So one question that's just come in, which is excellent question. How do you get buy-in from superiors for a program like this? I'm finding mine want the results, but don't want to loosen the purse strings. And I guess there's kind of like two questions there. Like one is for this program specifically to actually get budget for this. But I guess the other is how important is top-down support for your security programs in general, right? But let's answer the question that was asked.
Yeah. So for the riddle, the budget for that is zero budget. You don't need anything. It's all using what you have. If you use Google Calendar, we can put stuff there. If you use Slack, you can do that too. It is super simple, but it is fun to do. So for that particular one, I didn't have to spend any money. So it is free. It doesn't take much time from people. I did it at lunchtime the first time because I didn't want
nice
people
idea.
I didn't want people to say, hey, they are going to be losing 1 hour by playing this game, right? But nobody said that. It was, we have super good feedback. Plus my boss was, you should do this. We talked to HR. HR was helping me to promote the idea. So zero budget projects are always good, right?
So that's a great way of getting started. Like one other thing that, I mean, I personally do a lot of these stranger danger style sessions where I do like live hacking sessions. And one of the ways which we kind of get the most use out of that is by going up to companies and saying, hey, do you have a lunch and learn style thing? So like almost like trying to put it into an existing program where it sits in a lunch break almost. People go to learn. That's a great way of doing it. Let's talk a little bit about responsibilities, because I think, we're talking about now introducing a security team at Shutterstock when you arrived. When we think now, you've got the security team, you've got the dev team, they're working very, very close. Who realistically owns the responsibility between dev and security? Yeah,
so that's very interesting. And you mentioned it on the slides before. I remember a few years back when there was a vulnerability in, let's say, in Linux machine. We have to go and talk to the Unix team, right? They were in charge of patching that. We never had to go to developers to talk about patching Linux vulnerability. Now with containers, that's a totally different story. With third-party libraries, same thing. Years back, we didn't have a way to see if we had something bad in our third-party libraries. We didn't have visibility. But now the tools and the speed in which developers are getting more control of all the spectrum, right? Now they own the container too. So we are trying to promote the idea of they are responsible. So developers, the engineering team is responsible for working or selecting third-party libraries. So if they're selecting a particular version, okay, if there's an issue, you are responsible. You guys need to fix it.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think, in terms of scaling, that's the way security scales. Like you say, you have X many number of developers, and for every 100 developers, you'll have one security person. That one security person can't police everyone without slowing everyone down. So to enable the developers, and I think that's the important key. So in terms of let's go back a little bit more to the education program. In terms of I see a lot of organizations do security champions programs, security mavens, where you almost like have engineers who are trying to really skill up and be a resource to other. I hate saying people are a resource. Be a place that a person that other developers can kind of like go to for advice and things like that. Do you do anything similar to that?
So I have seen some of the security champions program. I don't like the idea of just adding more work to the developers. Like, oh, now you are part of the security champ, so you need to make sure that they are coding properly in a secure way. I don't think that will work with me, or it doesn't go with my style. If you can put back the image with the game. So the other thing that we did was Hacking Village, right? You see Hacking Village all the time when you go to a conference, right? A security conference, but developers don't see those Hacking Village. Develop or the rest of the company. This was open to anyone in the company. We did it again between 11 until 1. We put 4 stations, and all this is we didn't have to invest. Like, I had my own lockpicking set. So one section was teaching people how to do physical security, how to pick a lock. So I brought that to Shutterstock, to the office, and people were learning there. Now, with that, they will know the whole security team was there. So we were in 4 different stations, different people talking about security, and developers and the rest of the organization, they were playing with security. They were testing. We had one of the databases that had some that was public a few years back, and huge database with 1.4 billion username and passwords. We had it there, and people were able to go there. They were typing their email address, and the database was showing the plain text password to them. There was, oh, this is crazy. So they have another vision now about security, and that's what we look for from them.
Awesome. That's amazing. So we've talked about people. I want to talk about tools and processes a little bit together, but also relate them to people, because this is like one of the core areas that we want to kind of like focus on. Now you Snyk had already been implemented by the time you joined Shutterstock, right? How was that? Is already implemented. How is that? How is Snyk being? And I think this is a real core issue. And I work at Snyk, but it's not all about tools, right? It's about people. Because how was Snyk used previously at Shutterstock when you joined with 0 security people to today?
Yeah, so they had integration with GitHub that was adding a lot of visibility, which is great. And they were working in a soft gate. Okay. Now, when I started looking into the dashboard, I realized that there were like 200 ignores already that were not coming from security. They were coming from developers. They said, oh, we should ignore this vulnerability. And that was super interesting, because if there was, how did they decide to do that? There wasn't a security team before there. So it's interesting that having the right tool is one thing, but using it properly is a totally different thing. Now, we have to work with them, explain, hey, now if you need to have an ignore or an exception, you need to come to security. We will talk, we will review, and we will decide what is the best thing to do. So yeah, I have to change the configuration there just to provide those rights only to the admins, which are the security team.
Yeah, I think it's a good way that shows what happens when you have the enablement of developers. In other words, you have the insight, you have the tools, it'll tell you how to fix, but without the support of the security team, without the guardrails and the policies of the security team, the development team, and the education, right, to the development team, like in Jurassic Park, it will find a way. The development team will find a way to deliver with maybe workarounds or whatever. That's really interesting. So what was the first thing that you did? Because obviously, you brought Snyk in. Your applications will have likely had a backlog of vulnerabilities, but you would still want to be pushing further features, fixes, new applications going through. What was your approach to dealing with application security and specifically SCA?
Yeah, so again, I think I had visibility, and the first time I saw the dashboard, I said, there's a lot here, because there's a lot of red everywhere. And so one of the first things that we tried to do is stop the bleeding, right? Try to stop adding more new vulnerabilities to production, right? Now, how do you do that, right? I do need to have a plan. I need to talk to a cloud team or the operation team. And you have to, again, keep in mind that you cannot start blocking stuff right away.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to educate people. So the first time at the beginning, we said, okay, I have visibility. I have a Snyk integrated with GitHub, and I can tell you which are the worst vulnerabilities that we have right now. And for that, I use the CVS score, right? That's the way I do it. And we got a backlog, and we started asking people to take a look to those. There were not that many, and they were fixing them. Now, stopping the bleeding, you need to have used the tool in the right way. And we added a hard gate in the pipeline. So if you had a vulnerability that was critical, you were not going to be able to deploy to production.
Okay. So the hard gate put that block to make sure that you would never regress on your by introducing new critical vulnerabilities. So the first thing was, we have this baseline, which is where we are today. don't get worse than the baseline. Make sure we hold so we don't regress.
Right.
Where would you say, other than the hard block, where else would you run tests throughout the pipeline, from the developer, repo, all the way through? Is it mostly in CI, or do you have other places as well?
No, mostly TI, and again, the GitHub integration is very useful.
So this is for all new pull requests. They automatically get tested to make sure you're not regressing.
We haven't enabled that feature particularly because I think we still have to do some cleanup there. But yeah, that is. I have a new team, and they have been using the PR. And they say, oh, this is fantastic. All the information is going to GitHub, and we can read it there. It's very clear. We know what we need to do. We know what version to put there or how to fix the problem. So we have some teams using that, but no, it's not all of them.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And so let's talk about that ignore as well, because I feel like this is a really important way to kind of like, everyone mitigates risks differently. Every organization cares about different risks in different ways. When you do ignore, talk me through the process, particularly around culture, around the people, the discussions. What happens when a developer sees a vulnerability and questions whether they should ignore it or not? What would they do?
Right. So remember that they used to be able to ignore by themselves. That did change when we came on board. But so we took some rights from there, but we also are responsible to offer a solution, right, or support them. So every time a developer is getting blocked by the hard gate, they know that they can come to the security team and say, hey guys, I think this is a new vulnerability, or you know what, I missed this one. I know I have to fix it. Can you give me an extension? And we analyze, we say, okay, yeah, that's fine. I know you need to send this to production, so we are not going to keep blocking you. I go to Snyk UI, I create an exception, and that is going to get read by the pipeline. So next time they are deploying this to production, the pipeline is going to talk to Snyk, and the Snyk already have this exception that the security team created.
So there's no way for a developer to be able to create the exception or the ignore without the security team doing it. The security team needs to do that. Gotcha. Okay.
For the same reason, we have to be there all the time and be quick, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have a developer getting blocked today, and we will allow this in 2 days. That doesn't work for them.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And in terms of how you ask developers to fix, do you have like backlogs of vulnerabilities that you go through? What's the process there?
Yeah, so we can explain a little bit more of the process. So we started blocking CVS 10 right at the beginning, top of the chart, just 10. And because we had the GitHub integration, that allowed me to see the future kind of. I told them, you know what? It's great that you are working on the critical CVS 10 vulnerabilities now, but at the end of Q1, let's say, we will lower the threshold. We will start blocking 9.8 and above. But because I had visibility, I told them when that happened, these projects might get blocked. So you have 3 months to start working on those issues. And they did work on this because they didn't want to get blocked. The next quarter, we moved to let me see, 9.3. And again, I took a look at Snyk. I got the data from there, and we opened ticket for them. We created the backlog. There were those were tickets that they need to work on to avoid getting blocked at the end of each quarter. So we kept doing that for a year. And from CVS S10, that we started with a 10, we were able to get it down to 8.3 in 1 year, just following this methodology. Now, how do you pick the numbers, right? Because I went from 9.8 to 9.3, 8.8, 8.3. You have to keep in mind that you don't want to create too much work for them.
Yeah.
So we analyzed the data, and we realized that 9.3 was the next level that is going to allow us to lower the threshold without adding too much friction.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's almost like without overwhelming the development teams, and I think it's interesting because it's like the culture piece. The tech and tooling can go very, very fast, far faster. You can change those far faster than you can change people. So it's interesting to see that speed of gradual approach. I think with policies in development. Now we're talking about as part of that, you're doing all of that. You give people 3 months. They know what's going to happen in a few months. They know not to slow them to make sure they don't slow themselves down. They do work within that 3 months to make sure they're prepared and ready for that next drop. There's I don't know if anyone's read the ESG report, Modern Development Trends, very interesting report with some great insights from a survey. 26% of the survey respondents said that developers use security tools that slow down development cycles. And this is interesting, right? Because this kind of people are either using bad tools or traditional security tools that don't fit in modern practices. And I feel like this is also one of the key things where you see the resistance from adoption. How have you seen resistance of adoption of tooling or practices that slow down your development speed of development?
So my team always keep in mind that we try to minimize that, right? So even when we were adding a Snyk to the pipelines, the DevOps team was very careful, and they were testing how long it will take to scan a repo. And I think it was very fast, so we didn't have any issues with that. Now, in the future, we might change how we are doing this. So let's say they're going to dev to QA, and they want to do a QA to production. We might not have the hard gate there when they are jumping from QA to production. We might do something when they are still in production, and we will flag this project as it is ready for production. So you don't have to run the test when you are actually trying to move to production. It's going to be there ready. So it will minimize, or it will make everything faster for them. So you need to keep that in mind. So I guess some of the tools don't work that well, and they will introduce time to the pipelines, right? They will slow down the developer cycle. So every time we get a new tool, we have to make sure that doesn't impact the developers.
That's awesome. We're coming up to the end of our webinar. So for anyone who wants to ask a question, please drop it into the questions panel on this webinar interface. We have one just coming in right now, which is asking if you can give any example of processes that you've had to adjust, so that you put in place but had to adjust when it wasn't working anymore, and how you did that.
Okay, so there was one particular case. I don't know if you remember Lodash a few months back. So the original plan of the hard in the pipeline was, and one of my asks, even back 2 years back, I said, we need to have a way to create a global exception, because someday there's going to be a particular library that's going to be very popular, and it's going to have a vulnerability, and we will be blocking the entire company. And that did happen, and we were not ready with that feature. So at the end, I had to hit Snyk like 300 times just to create kind of like scripted exceptions for each one of the repos that were impacted by Lodash. After that, we sent an email. We explained that they will have, by default, because it was a new vulnerability, we always grant 30 days so they can fix it. So that is an improvement to the process, right? If there is a new vulnerability, fine. I'm not going to keep blocking you because you didn't know about this before. You will have 30 days to work on this vulnerability and fix the project. Now we do have the global exception feature in our Hardgate, and we were actually using that the other day. So those are adjustments or changes that we had to do to the process.
Yeah, and I think it's really good that you kind of like, as and when changes need to happen, you make the decision, you change it, and you're more than happy. You're not rigid. You're more than happy to make changes as required. And I feel like the number of different organizations that I've spoken to and met, there isn't there will be some processes that work with some and some that don't work with others. It largely depends on the organization themselves. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, I got my duck here. It largely depends on the organization themselves as to whether that process, etc., will fit and work with the organization and with the environment.
Yes.
So I think it's always good to have that flexibility in
Yes.
always being ready to make change.
Yeah, I think our security team is a flexible team. We try to understand the business. We have the business in mind all the time.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Christian, it's been amazing to speak to you, and it's been very enlightening to hear how Shutterstock have introduced the security programs through you, etc. Thank you very, very much for sharing all the wisdom and all the programs that you're running. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Well, big thank you to Christian and Simon for presenting today. Provided a lot of great insights, great discussion. So thank you so much for taking the time and lending your experience. I also wanted to say thank you to Snyk, who is our sponsor for today's webinar. We appreciate your continued support of CSA. If anyone comes up with additional questions, feel free to reach out to Snyk directly, or you can reach out to research@cloudsecurityalliance.org, and our team will get you connected with your presenters today. Additionally, check out the please check out the tabs below to rate and review the webinar so we know what content you're enjoying and also what we can improve upon. And finally, the recording of this webinar will be available within a few minutes of the conclusion. You just need to use the same link to rewatch or to share it with a colleague. To view other recorded webinars or sign up for new ones, you can go to cloudsecurityalliance.org/research/cloudbytes. Thank you everyone so much for attending today's webinar and have a wonderful day.